And it's time for updates from the world of business. It's going to happen right here in the next 25 minutes on Business Incorporated. You're welcome. This is what we have for you on the program today. We will look at that report from Bloomberg that Nigeria Air is set to begin in October. Industry players say this may not be possible. And then the tumbling rand, negative PMI. What do these mean for South African economy? Egypt's bond is enjoying a rally at this time after the rate hike. We'll give you updates now from the world of business. I'm Ini John McQuay. You're welcome. Let's do this together, starting with the market numbers in Africa. In Nigeria, we'll see that at intraday, not looking as good as yesterday, which was 0.90% at intraday. Now it's marginal 0.03%, but still on 65,284.21. South Africa is doing much better, 0.29% in the green, 76,000 there. And Egypt is closed on Friday, as usual, closed marginally down 0.02%, 17,451.44. Kenya has yesterday's numbers, positive 0.13% at 105.94. We move over to the Middle East there to see what's happening there. And we can tell you for the Middle East that it's looking positive there at intraday, 0.16%. Abu Dhabi, 798.91. Dubai also positive, 4,071.87. Other markets are closed for today, Friday. Saudi Arabia closed in the red, almost 1% down. Qatar closed in the red, deeply in the red, over 1.5%. Now, in the morning, during business morning, we did talk about, give you some corporate earnings, but we did not have an analyst, from the NGX to help us. So let's take some steps back and go back to the NGX and give you those numbers from the earnings, as we now have an analyst to join us. So we told you about Transcore. Now, it's Transcore Hotels, those numbers that we gave to you in the morning, Transcore Hotels, and highlights of that result. If we could have those slides there, says that's their share price. Investors enjoying more than 500%, 518.18% share price compared to last year. Let's look at their profits. Their profit compared 2022 to 2023 there. We see a growth of 49% for the profit there from 2.37 billion to 3.53 billion. Also, their revenue saw an increase there, 27% increase. Wow. So even though on the other hand, we had GlaxoSmithKline, recording negative and even now exiting their operations in Nigeria, we still have some good news. Let's have joining us now Azizat Awonuga here. She is a securities analyst for Parthian Securities Limited. Hi, Azizat. Well, when I saw these numbers, I was like, oh, thank God, we still have some good news, in spite of the FX factor, which we see affecting a lot of results at the first half of this year. We still have like Transcore Hotel. Hospitality business is still booming.
Yes, so due to the FX losses that, the exchange rate brouhahas, I should say, caused, right? We saw a lot of industries get affected. We even saw the large names, high cap stocks get affected, the likes of MTN, Airtel, even Dangote, right, Nestle. So it is not far-fetched, right? So for consumer goods, for example, where GSK falls under, we saw that the likes of UAC, they actually recorded an exchange rate gain of about 3.5 billion, but it was almost the exception. So GSK saying they're exiting the Nigerian market is really not as far-fetched as they had been divesting, bit by bit over the years. So right now, what we're waiting to see is the draft scheme of arrangement presented to SEC. So this might also include investor cash distribution. So I think today at intraday, GSK was the top gainer with 9.9%, priced at around 890. And this is because investors are hoping that when the scheme comes through, they are able to buy them off at higher prices.
That's very risky, isn't it? What if the scheme is not profitable?
Yes, it is. It is. I mean, we saw that in Ardova. So after they had also mentioned that they'll be delisting, we saw investors rush to, get the stocks, and then the prices that they actually took over at were lower at trading prices as at that day. So yes, it might be good for trading as a trader, but definitely not as an investor. So if, let's say, a trader had entered the market this morning in GSK, they would have made about 9%, 9.9% actually of their capital.
Do we know how long this window is open for? I mean, for JSK?
Okay, so generally, right, the market in itself, apart from the ones here and there where there are news, in the likes of GSK, then the likes of the Dangote Sugar Nascon merger, today we actually saw a bit of a decline, especially on the premium board. So if you had noticed the trend last week, what we saw was that there was a negative, there was a sequence of negative returns, and then this just turned back on Wednesday, right? The market gained about 0.2, and yesterday gained 0.1, it gained 1.55. But today, what we saw was that at midday, MTN was already losing 2.8% to a day low of 272 naira after opening at 280 naira. But this is not far-fetched, as the 52-week high for MTN was 285 naira. So it's just normal market movement, the reversal. So we all know about the surge that happened when the new president just came into play. And now the market is starting to correct itself. We also saw the likes of UBA down 1.7%, day low of like 14 naira 10 kobo, Access down 2.6%, 17 naira. But Zenith and WAPCO actually gained a bit, 0.9% and 0.7% respectively, to day highs of 34 and 28.20. So generally, the activities in the market are a bit mixed, but activity in the likes of GSK, Dangote, NASCON, where news are pushing trade volumes, are kind of sustaining that momentum for it to still be positive.
So we see a marginal increase at intraday. How do you see the market closing?
Yeah. Honestly, today is a bit tricky because it's trading very marginal. It's like right on the line, right? So it's 0.02, which is almost insignificant. So it's possible that we see moves or trades that can either move it higher or lower before market closes. So any little thing now can tilt the scale either ways.
All right.
So it's a tough call.
Tough call, but we'll certainly watch and report. Azizat Awonunga, securities analyst with Perfect Securities Limited. Thank you so much for your perspective.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, now let's move on. Now, the Bank of England, as we know, raised interest rates by 25 basis points, just like Nigeria. Their interest rate is now 5.25%. That happened on Thursday, UK Central Bank's 14th consecutive. Well, other neighboring countries are not immune to this. That's why Chiponda Chimbelu is joining us from Berlin now to tell us the reactions to this in especially Germany and the Eurozone. Hi, Chiponda. Thank you so much for your time. So what else did the Bank of England say, and how are you guys in Europe reacting to this?
Thanks for having me. Well, the Bank of England has been criticized for sounding too relaxed about inflation in the past. Now it seems that it is alarmed about inflation's rise, inflation as a long-term problem for the UK economy going forward. It has warned that it may still carry on with tightening borrowing rates. That's because the level of inflation is more than double the central bank's target of 2%. So now monetary policymakers are using language that makes it clear that the tightening cycle is still ongoing. Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey said that there are different paths to reaching the target inflation, and one of them could be leaving rates where they are. That means that perhaps the Bank of England could pause tightening at its next policy meeting in September. Now, analysts themselves are saying the language used this week shows that monetary policymakers are probably split about how to move forward. And they may be worried about the effects that high interest rates are having on the economy. So much like its counterpart in the Eurozone, the UK Central Bank will be watching the data that is coming in very closely to figure out what to do with interest rates. But the UK continues to have some of the highest inflation levels of any major economies. Take June, for instance, when inflation was at 7.9%, compared to the Eurozone's inflation rate of 5.5% in June and 3% in the US. So obviously, the UK has been struggling more than other major economies to get inflation under control.
It's stubborn inflation at this time, but it seems like a connection between the ECB, because we just saw ECB raise rates, and now the Bank of England.
The language that we saw yesterday shows that the Bank of England is concerned about the effect of interest rates on the UK economy. It described its policy as restrictive. So some UK monetary policymakers may be turning dovish.
All right, Chip, thank you so much for that. In the coming days, of course, they've warned us we'll see more rate hikes, not just in Nigeria now, Europe and the UK and all of that. Let's move to all the markets now. Settle in Asia first. Markets across Asia.
The U.S. stock market.
The index is closed mostly higher. Looking at the numbers there, the Reserve Bank of Australia cut the growth output for the country. I said inflation was moving in the right direction. That's for Asia. So look at the numbers there. The Nikkei 225 in the green, 0.10%, 32,192.75. The Kospi is just the same amount, but on the flip side, 0.10%. Hang Seng Index looking very relaxed there and comforting at 0.58%. And there, I don't know if we have the other numbers for the region. The Shanghai is also positive, 0.33%, and it's in Australia is 0.19% in the positive. We'll move to the United States now and see what that market is looking. These are the features, as we know. Nigeria is ahead of the United States in time. So these are features. The market rose. Investors weighed big tech earnings as they await key jobs data in the NASDAQ 100 features. It ticked higher on Friday morning as Wall Street passed the latest earnings. It's earnings everywhere, and features linked to the tech-heavy index rose about 0.72%. S&P 500 features climbed 0.35%, and features tied to the Dow Jones Industrial Average also climbed 0.17%. We have Maria, our correspondent in Washington now, to give us the closing numbers and how the market fared on Thursday.
The U.S. stock market tried to claw back on Thursday as many investors were reeling from the U.S.'s downgrade of its Fitch credit rating. This has caused many investors to be hopeful for the earnings reports from companies like Apple and Amazon. The U.S. stock market didn't quite see a positive day, but we did see just slightly down, and the U.S. stock market of the Dow Jones was down by 0.2%, while the S&P 500 was down by 0.3%, and the heavy tech NASDAQ was down by 0.1%. This was better than what we saw in days before, but it is definitely putting a stark look onto what the U.S. economy will see in the coming days and weeks ahead, which could have an impact on the U.S. stock market.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you for that coming from the United States. Let's take a break now. After the break, will Nigeria Air actually begin in October? We'll hear from industry players. And of course, we'll look at South Africa. The PMI is down. Rand is tumbling. What's going on? Matt Kindiga will tell us that after the break here on Business Incorporated. Welcome back to Watching Business Incorporated here on Channels Television. Well, the aviation industry in Nigeria has been really busy for hours now after Bloomberg reported that they had an interview with the Chief Executive Officer of Ethiopian Airlines, and he did say that Nigeria Air will begin operations in October. We know the controversies that have been surrounding this. Even before now, we even know that just the immediate past Minister of Aviation, Mr. Edi Sirika, is having to answer some questions on that launch of Nigeria Air, which was at the end, towards the end of the last administration led by President Muhammadu Buhari. So let's speak to an aviation consultant now to tell us, I mean, they have their eyes, their feet on ground, what's really happening. We have joining us virtually Mr. Bankole Bernard, aviation consultant. I'm sure you heard this news, Mr. Bankole. Good afternoon. I'm sure you also heard this news. And you guys have been really busy while Nigerians are being hopeful that perhaps relief has come the way of aviation and the runnings around there in the country.
Yeah, I mean, when I listened to the interview, I was quite excited and I was looking forward to it coming to life. Because the truth is, whether we like it or not, we need to have a national carrier. And if we cannot have a national carrier, the least we'll do with is a flag carrier. And I think the general public really needs to be educated on things like this. What is a national carrier? What is a flag carrier? You know, these things have happened in the past. It's been done in other countries without issues. But I don't know why the one of Nigeria is causing a lot of controversies. If you check very well, you see that Ethiopian Airlines has a base in Lome, Togo, and they've been operating from that base. They have even developed a regional flight from there, and it's working smoothly. And they're about replicating the same thing in the Nigerian airspace. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because if you look around the world, there's been a stiff competition amongst the airlines all around the world. Different airlines moving into different markets, trying to do something new there. I mean, it's a global village, and there's absolutely nothing that should stop anybody. Ethiopian Airlines has positioned itself to be a flag carrier for Nigeria. That will help Nigeria in a lot of ways. And I think that was what the former minister was really trying to do, try to buttress to us. But a lot of controversies sprung up from that. So I'm looking forward to see this materialize, because if you listen to the interview very well, Ethiopian Airlines has brought forth certain things. First of all, there's a 49% shares that Ethiopian Airlines has brought forth to this Nigerian Air to operate. Not only that, they've got a management contract which empowers them to manage this particular airline to profitability. So in the real sense of it, Nigeria as a country is going to benefit from it. Nigerians will benefit from it. And that will bring about a boost in the aviation sector.
All right, Mr. Ben.
That's what each and every one of us should look forward to.
Yeah, obviously, everyone is looking forward to it. But, I mean, the conversation is it really going to happen? Because we know that the Ninth Assembly had, made some pronouncement terminating or suspending the agreements before. You people who are in the industry had said that things were not done transparently and how it should be done. Even the plane that was used for that launch, I'm sure you heard of the controversy around it. It was on lease, it was borrowed, it had some things on the body, it wasn't, you understand? So when you consider the reality of it, are we looking at a launch in October for real?
If the CEO of one of the biggest airlines in the globe has made such pronouncement, remember that he's not going to stick out his neck. They're not going to throw away 49% just like that. He made that pronouncement that he's going to launch. They are the one coming with the equipment.
But Nigeria is also a major stakeholder, so you cannot just ignore. You cannot ignore the sentiments or the voice of the Nigerian stakeholders. Also, remember this Ethiopian airline. They have their CEO also step down in the midst of all of this.
And the new CEO is still confirming to us that it's going to happen in October.
Okay.
Look, they stand to gain a lot as well. Let's look at it. It's business for them. It's business. Nigeria is a major market, and they just don't want to lose it to anybody, because they might change and move somewhere else, but they want to make sure that they are able to provide the service to Nigerians and make good money from Nigerian market. I don't see anything wrong with that.
Okay.
I think we should all be looking forward to it.
Okay.
I think what we saw when the launch came about was that we saw an aircraft and we all worked with the assumption that, we've purchased an aircraft. It wasn't a purchased aircraft. It was used to unveil the Nigeria Air.
All right, Mr. Bernard. All right, Mr. Bernard. We'll certainly settle on this. We'll count down to October. Aviation consultant, Mr. Bernard Bankole. Thank you for your time.
You're most welcome. Have a beautiful day.
All right, you too. All right, so let's go to Egypt now before we settle in South Africa. Egypt's dollar bonds rallied the most in emerging markets after the nation resumed its monetary tightening cycle, boosting optimism that authorities will get an IMF bailout back on track. Debt due February 2016 rose 0.9 cents on the dollar to 53.4 for its biggest gain since July 14. The extra yield investors demand to own the country's securities rather than U.S. Treasury narrowed 3 basis points. The central bank raised its benchmark interest rate to the highest level in record, going back to 2006. Underscoring its resolve to contain inflation hovering around 36%. That surprised economists who had expected no change at Thursday's meeting. After all, Egypt had sought to build up its foreign exchange reserves in the build-up to another currency devaluation. Let's head to South Africa now. This is where we'll draw the curtains. But first, let's welcome Matt Kindiger joining us for the program. Man, Matt is looking at South Africa this week. Hasn't been very good. We saw that PMI down below the 50 benchmark. We also saw that the rand also dwindled. There are a lot of blows coming on South Africa at this time. Matt, where are these shocks coming from?
So unfortunately, South Africa's economy is facing a number of challenges at the moment. So really the big issue at the moment is power cuts and also infrastructure disruption. What we are seeing is investors becoming increasingly anxious about the outlook for the South African economy, especially when you look at the rand. Although the rand has gained a bit of territory against major currencies since it reached a record low in May this year, investors are worried about the fact that the outlook for the economy is a bit weak, power shortages are getting a bit worse, but also that, for example, the US Fed has raised interest rates and the South African Reserve Bank decided to keep interest rates unchanged at its last monetary policy committee meeting. So a lot of investors are a little bit anxious about what the outlook is for the South African economy. And we're not seeing significant changes in terms of how the government is tackling some of the challenges the country is facing.
Yeah, one area I believe that South Africans are looking forward to change is the power shortages. Any hope there?
So in terms of power shortages, unfortunately, no, we're not particularly optimistic in terms of the outlook for power availability in South Africa. There was a bit of a reprieve at the start of the winter in June because of a mild winter, and that put less pressure on the grid. But the outlook is not great. When we put Eskom's performance into context, it's worth remembering that in May, on a 12-month rolling average basis, output in South Africa from Eskom was at the lowest level it's been since September 2000, so a 23-year low. And the decline in Eskom output has been accelerating. So we are expecting power shortages probably to get a bit worse before they get better. And this will weigh on the country's growth outlook. We do expect the private sector, especially wealthier households and also manufacturers, industries, to invest in power backup power. So, for example, generators and solar PV and inverters. But really, if companies are waiting for Eskom to solve the problems of power shortages, they're going to be disappointed. And one of the main reasons is because we're not seeing a large-scale investment announced today for major power stations. So really, we need to be seeing much bigger new power stations being constructed to solve the problem in the next couple of years. And this is not happening at the moment. So certainly it's going to be quite a difficult period for electricity availability.
All right, Matt, looks like South Africans will need some tips from in Nigeria. We don't depend largely on the government anymore. We found a way around this. But Matt, we have to draw the curtains there. Thank you so much for the perspective looking at the South African real sector and the economy.
Great. Thanks very much.
Well, that's it on the program. Thank you so much for being a part of Business Incorporated. Started with Will, ended with me, but it's all update from the world of business. We'll do it again next week. But remember, tomorrow, 7 p.m., Will Ibon will be here to give you a summary of what has happened in the markets right here in Nigeria and around the world. Please don't miss that, 7 p.m. tomorrow, Capital Market with Will Ibon. I'm off for the weekend. I'm going to rest. I'll see you on Monday, God's grace.